Rob Lucas, Treasurer of South Australia, good to have you join us again on Flowing.
Lovely to be here.
Now, you've had a bit of a win in relation to what's been a pretty public and visible industrial campaign by the ambulance officers regarding all of their concerns, but you're going to see some chalk coming off of ambulances soon.
Well, we're very pleased to see that the independent industrial umpire has actually told the union, look, this is unacceptable. You've got to actually remove the chalk and stop your industrial action by way of an interim order, which will at least be valid until the end of next week. So we've taken action with the independent industrial umpire because it is completely unacceptable. We've got no problems if union members want to complain against the government of the day. They can chalk and deface their own private vehicles. They have no right or entitlement to chalk and deface taxpayer-funded vehicles in pursuit of their political campaigns.
Well, it did strike me as odd as I saw these appearing around the place that you don't see police officers putting that on their own vehicles or other elements of the public service.
Well, exactly. Police officers or, for example, health workers with their government-funded cars. I mean, where would you draw the line? It just seems to be the height of arrogance for the union bosses to think that they have some entitlement to chalk or to deface taxpayer-funded vehicles in pursuit of their political campaign. I mean, they're quite entitled to run their political campaign. They've got a former Labor Party media advisor devising their advertising campaign. They're running strong advertising campaigns against the government on the particular issue, and they're entitled to do that, but they're not entitled to take action in relation to taxpayer funding.
I guess we'll have to wait and see if there's compliance with this order when it comes to the chalk coming off. It's only for, a week, and then that gets further reviewed, I take it, by the tribunal.
That's right. I think it's next Thursday, 5 o'clock, I think the tribunal will make a decision about whether or not it will continue. We've sought to have the whole dispute arbitrated by the independent umpire because we've been unable to reach agreement. We've reached agreement with virtually every other union in the state with enterprise bargaining, with the exception of the ambulance officers. We've reached agreement with the nurses, the doctors, the teachers, the police, the salaried officers within the public sector. All of those we've reached agreement with, sometimes after periods of industrial action, but we've always reached an agreement. But sadly, the ambulance union are obviously intent on just running a political campaign right through to the election. They obviously hope to see the election of a Labor government, and that's their entitlement, but they're not entitled, in our view, to chalk and deface taxpayer-funded ambulances.
Now, their main objective has been about this ramping issue, at least that's what's the stated objective. What is the government doing in relation to ramping around our public hospitals?
Well, we're very pleased to see that the recent figures show almost a 50% decline in the worst ramping figures that we saw, which was in October of last year. And what we've done is we've actually increased the number of ambulance staff, so there's nearly 300 more ambulance staff than under Labor's last budget, but more ambulance staff by itself doesn't solve the problem. What you have to increase the size of the emergency departments, which we're doing. You've got to get mental health patients out of emergency departments and into specialist facilities, which is what we're doing. And you have to get people who don't need to be in emergency departments out of those EDs to take some of the pressure off the emergency departments, which is, again, what we're seeking to do as well. So you need a holistic approach to tackling ramping. One part of it is increased numbers of staff, which is what we've done, but that's not going to be sufficient.
Now, just lastly, we've been picking up this commentary about, and I'd like to get your perspective on it regarding these funding announcements for public hospitals the government put out recently. Were they accurate figures about $500 million, or was it $160 million? And indeed, are Labor's policies costed?
Well, Labor's policies are now $2.5 to $3 billion, and they're completely unfunded. And Mr. Malinowski is refusing to say how they'll be paid. Look, South Australian families aren't stupid. They know if someone's promising $3 billion worth of extra promises, someone has to pay, and it'll be struggling households and struggling businesses in South Australia that'll be slugged if Labor is elected. That's the simple reality. I can assure you as the Treasurer, I don't have a lazy $3 billion sitting behind the Treasury sofa waiting to be spent. If Mr. Malinowski wants to promise $3 billion worth of new spending, he's going to have to tax or increase charges or increase costs to South Australian families and businesses in a very significant way.
So the government's commitment at the moment during the state election campaign for additional spending in health generally or on hospitals is what, $500 million?
Well, a good chunk of that is actually the 123 million of that is new spending. There's $200 million which was approved prior to going into caretaker, and that will just continue to fund our COVID capacity right through to the end of June. So to be fair, whilst that's new money, both Labor and Liberal, if they're elected, will have to continue that unless they want to not be able to cope with the ongoing challenges from COVID. So the government's commitments in relation to spending are significantly less than the $3 billion that Mr Malinowski was talking about. And again, the only way he can fund $3 billion is by slugging households and families and businesses significantly more.
Well, Rob Lucas, you haven't got much longer in the job as Treasurer. We're not saying you're going to lose, but you're retiring. Any final messages for our listeners in case we don't catch you again before the election?
Well, it's always been a delight, Ricky, to talk to you and your listeners, and I'm sure you'll be able to train up the fresh young talent, whoever wins the next election. I'll be sailing off into political oblivion in a retirement home somewhere.
Rob Lucas, thank you for joining us over the journey. Much appreciated.
Thanks, Enrique. Bye-bye.